With this coronavirus, isn't it about time that we had an adult in the room? Hello again, everyone. I'm Eli's dad with Project Eli, where we educate, lead, and inspire. And today we're going to change it to Project Eli, which is Rant, Educate, Lead, and Inspire. So I'm going to get started right away, all right, with questions, comments, and rants. All right, now first of all, one of the things that we've heard is that we should be treating this particular scenario as a war. Now, I used to be an American history teacher, was an American history major in school. Can I talk to you a little bit about the Founding Fathers and what it was that they intended with the Constitution? Their intent was that the level of government that has jurisdiction over a particular scenario is the one that's to be the most relevant. For example, if you're talking about a school system, then that's going to be the local, the city, the mayor. If you're talking about war against another country, you don't want to get all the mayors or all the governors together. You want to have that centralized. You want to have that from a national perspective. That's where the federal jurisdiction takes over. If we're going to treat this as a war, then we need to have some federal jurisdiction as far as providing supplies, the ventilators, the masks, the gloves, the PPE equipment, all of that stuff. We need to have a federal task force that actually does something and doesn't say when it's inconvenient for them, that's the jurisdiction of the state. The governor should be providing that. We're in a war. When you're in a war, then you, as the federal entity, have to take command. No question about that. And the message that you give has to be to hope for the best, but to prepare for the worst. So to say that, hey, I don't think that they're going to need 40,000 different ventilators, maybe they won't. But in the event that they do, wouldn't it be great to have those available? It's better to have to throw stuff out. I mean, when you're in a war, when you're in the front lines, you don't want to run out of bullets and be stuck in the foxhole without any ammunition. Let's make sure that our front line soldiers have the equipment that they need. And as in a war, let's have the general populace unite as one to help provide them with the equipment that they need. And let's start making it something that is organized, directed, and let's get going on it right now. We don't want to have to wait and have a reactionary scenario, which is what we've had. Oh, we don't need this. Oh, we do all of a sudden. Let's get enough of that already. Now, let's talk a little bit about the policy. Now, can we insert some common sense here? The country known as China has 1.4 billion people in it. The United States has roughly, and I'm rounding up a little bit, 400 million. So China has roughly 1 billion more people than the United States has. Now, can we take a look at the numbers? The numbers are telling us that we in the United States have the highest number of cases of anybody, including a country that has 1.4 billion people in it. Additionally, if you were to take a look at the standard of living and compare the standard of living of China versus the standard of living in the United States, I think we can safely say that we as a country have a higher standard of living. Yet, our numbers are continuing to double pretty much every 2 or 3 or 4 days, and the numbers of the people in China are not. So the question comes to mind, how come? What steps did they take? How are things going? Now, I recognize that you can't always trust what another government, what another country tells you, because they say what they want to say. But the point is, clearly the number of cases in China has started to diminish. Yet our leadership is saying that they want to have the churches full on Easter. And the logic that they use to justify that action is the American people are not built for this. Well, here's my thought. here's what I'm built for. I want to poop gold nuggets, but unfortunately, that's not the case. So I have to make a judgment. I have to make some adjustments. Let me give you a different example. Let's suppose that instead of the United States having the highest number of cases, let's say that Mexico had the highest number of cases. And all of a sudden they said, you know what? We're going to relax the restrictions and let people gather in large numbers like they would on Easter Sunday for a church service. What would the United States say? What would the leaders in the United States say to that? They would say, that's very irresponsible. There you are, your numbers are continually going up, they're doubling every 2 or 3 or 4 days, and yet you're relaxing the restrictions that you're putting on people? Does that make sense? What would we do? We would probably invoke something like the Monroe Doctrine, which, and I'm just paraphrasing here, says, for all intents and purposes, anything that puts the United States in jeopardy puts us in the game. Well, we would be in the game if something was happening in Mexico because of the proximity of the two countries. But you know what? It's a worldwide scenario. Can we please take a look at the numbers? Can we take a look and see that things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and not say to ourselves, you know what? We're not built for this. You know what? In extreme times, you have to take extreme measures. There's no question about that. Now, also consider that leaders in the public eye, in the forefront of the public eye, have a tremendous responsibility. Everything you say influences some people or all of the people. Now, when you repeatedly refer to this scenario as the China virus, you can't be naive enough to think that it's not going to create some backlash. Or when you say, I want the churches to be full on Easter, that doesn't deliver the message that the situation isn't really all that critical. To think like that is childish. You're in the public eye. When people see something, hear something, when the masses hear something, they will cling to whatever is convenient for their particular scenario. That's the message that's being sent. Now, not everybody believes that particular message, but there's a certain number of people that are. And even a small percentage of people like that, 10%, 20%, that think like that, are creating a significant hardship for the rest of us that are trying to keep our social distances. You know, Charles Barkley once exclaimed in a commercial, I'm not a role model. But people in the public eye have to take the responsibility that everything that they say has impact. Yesterday, I was out and I was waiting in line, as people do, keeping my distance, and a young man was behind me. Now, when we started to converse, the very first thing out of his mouth was, and I quote, if I catch it, I catch it. I've got my life to live, unquote. Now, I resisted the very strong urge to hop on my soapbox, and instead I asked him, so, what do you do for work? And he said that he was a manager at Wendy's. Now, here's a guy that's leading, yes, leading young people with that attitude. At that moment, I wanted to increase the space of our social distancing to where we were in different time zones, because if this guy doesn't care, didn't my odds of catching this thing just go up exponentially? Do you follow what I'm saying? Leadership needs to effectively sell the correct mindset of this problem. Now, this gentleman then asked me when I thought things would get back to quote-unquote normal. And I told him, you know what? They're never going to be exactly the same. There's going to be a new normal. Now, here's why I said that. Many of you are, you're familiar with, we talk about 9/11, but many of you are too young to actually remember what went on during 9/11. Now, you know what the aftermath of 9/11 was? Well, let me tell you an example. Before 9/11, I was running a couple of offices in the Midwest, one in Indianapolis, one in Detroit. And what I would do is I my home base was in Indianapolis, and I would send my leaders for, to train them and also to help the other offices and to get feedback on the other office from Indianapolis to Detroit. Now, it was a $19 plane flight, which is chump change, but you had to order your tickets 3 weeks in advance in order to get that rate. So I would order, and if I decided not to send somebody, so what did I lose? 40 bucks? All right, not a big deal. But I would have it scheduled, leave on Tuesday, come back on Thursday. I was always put in my name. And at that time, I would send somebody, and they didn't check, your ID, your driver's license, your fingerprints before you hopped on the plane. If you had a ticket, you got on the plane. It was easy. What's the aftermath of that 9/11 now? You have to stand in line all the time and show your ID, open your bags, all of that stuff. So there are always going to be consequences. My point is, there's going to be a new normal from this. All right? Now, I'll give you a second example of one of the things that people always do is handshake. Now, if you've ever watched a movie that predates, let's say 1960, all right, even later than 1960, let's say 1968, one of the things you do is you always see people shaking hands. Now today, one of the first things you do is you teach your kids is like, hey, give me a high five. All right, and kids go around, they give high fives, so on and so forth. We didn't used to have high fives. So what changed? Well, I can tell you, and I'm not 100% positive on this, but I'm pretty sure that I'm accurate. Years ago, I used to work as a fundraiser for the U.S. Olympic Committee. And one of the things that I found out was that the women's U.S. Olympic volleyball team used to have kind of a neat thing that they did when they would score points to celebrate. What they would do is they would take their hands and they would slap hands with the person, and that was like sort of the equivalent of today's high five, what you do. So that evolved from the 10 to the 5, and now virtually everybody does the high five. How much do you want to bet that handshaking around the world is going to be significantly diminished, if not ended, because of this present situation? What do you think we're going to do? Well, a couple of things that come to mind. We can do the bow, all right, which is very respectful. You can do the Magic Johnson finger pointing, which is what Magic Johnson did in the championship. But, the point is, things are going to change. It's not going to be fashionable to shake hands anymore. And one of the things, the bro hug, as far as I'm concerned, the bro hug is out. That's gone. Now, in times of crisis, the masses are starving for good, responsible leadership. And when push comes to shove, the 95% crowd looks to the 5%ers. Now, what does this mean? It means the 95%ers want to rely, R-E-L-Y, on something. It does not mean that they want to be relied to. I don't need to hear that, this country would be all over if I didn't stop the planes coming in from China. Is that I don't want to hear that. We don't need to hear how before I got here there was an antiquated system that I had to inherit and I had to change. Also, we don't need the media to stir the pot of finger-pointing blame in a non-political situation. I mean, this is life and death. There's not Democrats, Republicans, or communists are here. I mean, everybody is suffering from this. You got to assume that the media representatives that are asking the questions in these news conferences are the top people in their field. Because if I was a TV network, why would I send a novice to ask questions? So the media also has to assume a responsibility to ask questions that will help move things forward and not help to create and expand the culture of finger pointing. We don't need finger pointing. After all, let's say one of your relatives is in the hospital and they're in critical condition, do you sit there and say, boy, if this didn't happen or that didn't happen? What you say is, I'm looking for solutions. What medication? What therapy? Those are the things that you look for. We're looking for solutions. Can we please stop finger pointing? We must all carry the baton of leadership responsibly, unselfishly, and with a transparency of facts to deliver the appropriate mindset that will serve us best in these challenging times. Let's stop finger pointing. Can't we please all educate, lead, and inspire? Now, I would love to see your comments on my personal thoughts on this special edition of Project Eli. Normally we only publish on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, but I felt compelled because of all the things that I'm hearing to voice my opinion and share it with you. You know, if you're moved by the things that we talked about, please share this video with other people. Now, this is Eli's dad in Project Eli signing off for today. And because we will never end a meeting on a philosophical note, let's all get out there and charge! I'm Eli's dad.